Finally, I'd like to talk about the last principle of design, and that is contrast. And contrast, we've already looked at many examples of contrast and how contrast becomes kind of stresses sort of like the visual difference in size and shape and color between the elements to kind of enhance sort of like the perception of the message, sort of like intended. So contrast also sort of like draws and directs the viewer's attentions to the viewer's attention to specific areas of information. So again, if I was just to kind of quickly draw just a basic form within a composition, and then I was to draw another form that's similar. Obviously, this would be a difference in contrast of size, where one element is larger than the other. So again, as I had mentioned, shape and size and color all have different between elements can be used within the principles of contrast. I think it might be helpful to see a few examples of that, so it makes a little bit more sense. Um, Here is an example of a poster that's designed by Lester Beale in 1937 for the United States government. It was called the REA, or the Rural Electrification Administration poster, and this was a poster to kind of campaign or to advertise, uh, you know, the energy, in less urban areas of the United States. It was sort of like a public campaign that the government had developed. But anyways, I guess the thing that I wanted to mention here within this design is the contrast of size, and of course emphasis that the light bulb, for example, is the most important part of the composition, or where the focal point is. So there's a real dynamic contrast between the size of the light bulb and the house that you see here in the background, kind of at play. The next example is contrast of shape. This is the CBS logo designed by William Golden in 1951 for the CBS broadcasting system. And I think it's a beautiful, it's just such a simple, beautiful design, and there are a lot of different elements and principles that are happening collectively within this design. There's basic shapes, um, uh, obviously, that are kind of working here, as well as a really just strong dynamic negative positive or figure ground relationship between the circle and the eye shape, and then the circle around those other two shapes. So obviously this also denotes an eye, of course. So you can kind of clearly see that within this. So, but there's a really strong contrast of shape here and how they kind of are juxtaposed together within this to kind of create a dynamic relationship. And then the third example here is contrast of color. This is obviously black, white, and one color. This is a theater poster for Othello by Shakespeare, and it was designed by the German graphic designer Günter Rambo for the theater of Wiesbaden. And I just think it's just a seductively beautiful, kind of simplified poster design that uses, this contrast of color in a very subtle but yet beautiful and very kind of dynamic way here. This almost blood you know, running kind of vertically down the right side of the poster design, and so kind of creates a really strong contrast of color. Very dynamic, but in a very kind of beautifully, kind of seductively rich and very kind of evocative and very simple way of designing this. The other thing here that may be obvious, but is interesting to point out, is that the blood drop, if you will, that's kind of running down the page also runs over the left eye of Othello, this kind of stylized illustration of Othello. And so it kind of creates a depth on the page by, you know, putting one element in front of the other, where the poster would have otherwise have felt very flat. By just adding that blood drop over the eye, it suddenly creates a real kind of sense of depth within the picture plane. So that sort of like ends my discussion of the principles of design. So I think it's important that that you think about and are really kind of encouraged to kind of explore both the elements and principles of graphic design. Thank you.